It was cool. Hi, Richard.
Hey.
If you were here last week, you might remember that the book of the month is called The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton and Laura Love Harton. And the storyline is that Anthony Ray Hinton spent 30 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. And despite evidence that when the murder was committed, he was at work 15 miles away, he was convicted based on a sheriff's testimony that an old, rusty handgun owned by his mother was the murder weapon. He was held in solitary confinement for 10 years. 10 years. In 2002, the state of Alabama received expert testimony from FBI experts that the handgun could not possibly have been the murder weapon. For 15 years, the state of Alabama refused to do anything about it. Until 2015, when the U.S. Supreme Court got the case, they ordered a retrial, at which point Alabama dropped all charges. Mr. Hinton's first words upon release from prison, and obviously he was met at the prison by family, friends, media, his first words, "The sun does shine." And he made that the title of his memoir. It's actually a little longer. You can find it by that, "The Sun Does Shine. How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row." So that's the book of the month. The topic for today is moving beyond our story. We all have a story. Is your story more disturbing than the one you just heard? I hope not, but possibly. Have you been able to move past your own story? We all know, we've all seen quotes about being unable to control what happens to us in our lives. The only thing we can control is how we respond to those events. That's almost a daily post on Facebook, which I love. I love that kind of stuff. But think about it. Remarkably, that even applies to drivers we encounter on the highway. I have finally observed a pattern. No matter how angry I get at other drivers, they seem unaffected. Usually the only person affected by my anger at drivers is me and possibly Susan, who hasn't jumped out of the car yet. Welcome. We're happy to have you. We don't care when you come. We're happy to have you. Welcome. I'm talking about a book by a man who was in prison for 30 years for a murder he didn't commit, and how you move past that story. Here's a quote from Mr. Hinton's book. "Despair was a choice. Hatred is a choice. Anger was a choice. I still had choices, and that rocked me. I could choose to give up or hang on. Hope was a choice. Faith was a choice. And more than anything else, life was a choice." 30 years on death row. Now, I don't know if he had that belief going in, or it took time to develop that. I haven't quite going by the outline that was submitted. Dr. Holmes tells us, oh, I missed a part. Faith was a choice, and more than anything else, life was a choice. Compassion was a choice. Compassion for himself and for others. And then Dr. Holmes tells us from his Beverly Hills lectures, your own choice has decided you. In Science of Mind, he says, what a man has and what he is the result of the subjective state of his thought. In Science of Mind, he says, my opportunities are unlimited. There's a divine urge to express. It permeates me and it fills all space and time and people. Today, the possibilities of my experience are unlimited. The Spirit flows through me, inspiring me and sustaining that inspiration. I have ability and talent, and I'm busy using them. This talent is divinely sustained and marketed under a universal plan of right action. So Dr. Holmes had a good sense. Luckily, he didn't have to spend 30 years in prison to develop this philosophy, these teachings. I want to give you one more quote from him. This is from the philosophy of Ernest Holmes. You will discover no greatness outside of yourself. That which appears to be greatness in another is merely as much as you have projected from yourself to the other. As that hidden thing is removed, you and I will see in the other the more perfect image. We have disclosed it. We couldn't disclose it until we saw it as it is. And we can't see it as it is until we are as it is. And there isn't any more is-er than that. Now I want to give you another quote from Mr. Hinton's book. I was born with the same gift from God we are all born with. The impulse to reach out and lessen the suffering of another human being. It was a gift. And we each had a choice whether to use this gift or not. We need to think about the fact that we are all more than the worst thing we have done. Everything, I realized, is a choice. And spending your days waiting to die is no way to live. Spending your days waiting to die is no way to live. And that applies to all of us. It's just, well, okay, I take it back. I'm not the oldest person in the room, but I'm close. I won't identify Randy. But as we age, we just have this different outlook sometimes. Why? Don't spend your life waiting to die. Live, live, live. Okay, back to Mr. Hinton's quotes. No baby is born a murderer. No toddler dreams of being on death row. Every killer on death row had to be taught to be a killer by parents, by a system, by the brutality of another brutalized person. But no one was born a killer. So what's our story to be? Victim or victor. Here's a quote from Mr. Anonymous, who probably has more famous quotes than anybody. Could be Miss Anonymous, I'm not sure. I don't want to be sexist. The main reason it's hard to be happy is we don't want to let go of the things that make us sad. Anonymous was clever. Many of you are familiar with the writings and teachings of Eric Butterworth. Life does not happen to you. It happens for you. So he's reminding us that we have the power to rewrite our lives, to reinterpret, reinvent our lives. Even when something heinous occurs, we have the choice in how to respond. At our core, we have the same power that keeps the planets in orbit. That's where we come from. It allows the sun to shine, grass to grow, and is breathing itself as each of us. With power such as this applied through science of mind teachings, we realize we don't have to play the same broken record over and over and over. We can change. Now, there's a Netflix documentary about comedy. And one of the things it explores is there a line that comedy can cross that becomes just simply offensive and no longer funny? And in that documentary, it explores one of the most heinous crimes, literally not of our day, because we haven't lived that long. Nazi death camps. Is there anything that they can make funny about that? We don't have to answer that question, but the point is, there are still a few Nazi death camp people alive. And their life experience after that is dramatically different. Some remained the victims the rest of their lives. Others just released it. They changed their story. They had an amazing resilience to let go of their story, quit living facing death, and live a great life. When Nelson Mandela was imprisoned in South Africa for so long, here's a little trivia fact you may not know. They had to change the guards every 3 months. Every 3 months the guards were reassigned. You know why? Because he was so nice, so sweet, so compassionate to his jailers that they began to adore him. And the head honchos were concerned about that relationship. So they kept rotating the guards. You know what happens? All the guards began to adore him. Not just a few. So you'd ask, how'd that work out? Leo Biscaglia, your talent is God's gift to you. What you do with it is your gift back to God. In an interview on 60 Minutes, Morgan Freeman said something. If we want to end racism, we need to stop talking about it. I'm not sure I agree with that. But it is sound science of mind principle that if you stop putting energy into something, it ceases to exist. Where we put our energy, where we put our focus, it expands, grows. We get more of it. So maybe he was right. But the one thing we can take out of that is we can stop telling the story in the same way. We can stop accepting the cultural status quo that says, oh, that's just how it is. Because that's how it's been. I think I've used this Einstein quote before. You cannot solve a problem at the same consciousness level that created the problem. Racism can't be solved at the level of belief, of thought, of emotion that created racism. Sexism, homophobia, abuse were created at a level of understanding, beliefs and consciousness, and if we're to make those thought forms and beliefs disappear, then we have to elevate, expand our consciousness, our awareness, that has no need for these stories, no need for this energy, that way of thinking. It must begin in our individual consciousness before we can express it at a global consciousness. We have to change our story. One of my favorite New Thought minds is Judge Thomas Troward, if you're not familiar with him. I know Kate is and some others. He was brilliant, and this is a quote from him. Relying on the maxim that principle is not bound by precedent, we should not limit our expectations of the future. And if our speculations lead us to the conclusion that we've reached a point where we're not only able, but also required by the law of our own being to take a more active part in our personal evolution than heretofore, this discovery will afford us a new outlook on life and widen our horizon with fresh interests and brightening hopes. So how do we change the world? Well, almost every week I quote Rumi. Here we go. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. Get it? Yeah. Thomas Edison. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. And if necessary, one more time. So how do we change the point of view to get the whole story? What would happen if we looked at our lives from different vantage points? If you were walking down the sidewalk and someone painted number 6 on the sidewalk, you'd say number 6. But if your best friend was walking towards you, they'd go number 9. Who's wrong? Neither one is wrong. Depends on your vantage point. They are both accurately seeing what's before them. So it depends on your perspective. Well, as always, there's more to the story. It's human nature to reach a conclusion first about something and then search for evidence to back up what we believe. We are biologically programmed to do that. It's part of the fight or flight situation. Make a decision first. Is this dangerous? Go. It's not dangerous? Yeah, keep looking. That's how we're wired. Reach a conclusion. Isn't that the case of what happened to Mr. Hinton? I'm sure we all made a judgment about the sheriff, but he reached a conclusion. And then his investigation was solely to prove his conclusion. We won't get into his motivation or what his thoughts and beliefs were, but he had a conclusion, and then he conducted an investigation to prove his conclusion. What if we, all of us, could learn to look at things with an open mind before we reach a conclusion? What if we didn't reach the conclusion until we did the research, the investigation? I happen to live with an online research guru. We need a new brand of dog food. She pulls up analysis of brands of dog food. And the one finds out a really expensive one we've been buying is pretty crappy quality. And the dogs don't like it, but it's expensive, so it must be good. No. She overruled my conclusion. Well, it's expensive, it must be good. Not so much. It requires a whole new way of thinking. Wait, a whole new way of thinking. That reminds me of something. Haven't I heard somewhere what can happen if you change your thinking? We can change our lives. Have you heard that one? Like every week here? Change your thinking, change your lives. So let's look at a specific example. How many of you are parents? So you're a parent. That's a label, right? You're a parent. Oh, I thought maybe you were a child of someone else. Does that apply too? Oh, you're a parent and a child? Are you a child? You're not a parent, are you?
No.
One day, maybe. You're a parent and a child. How many of you are employees? Oh, labels. How many of you are supervisors? Oh, more labels. How many of you are students? Teachers? Nurses? Practitioners? Kate's arm going to get tired. These are labels. They don't identify who we are. So were you wrong when you said you were a parent? No. But that's just part of the picture. Can we begin to expand our perspective of who and what we are? How we label ourselves? When we actually take the time to strip away the what-if story and search for facts, truths, as it pertains to our own roles, our own experiences, imagine the possibilities, new understanding, freedom that comes from this exploration internally. Reject the labels, reject the story. Whatever perspective you have of yourself is smaller than the perspective Spirit has of you. It doesn't serve us to live small. Allow Spirit to expand within. See what a difference it makes. I'm not even going to go into the theory behind it of quantum physics, in which we're each an infinite number of potentials until we have an observation which collapses the potentials. We are powerful. Change the story, change the perspective. The sun does shine, even on death row. It's tough to see the sun when you're in solitary confinement for 10 years, but the sun is still shining. The sun is still shining right now in Louisiana, even though there's a hurricane. The sun is above it. Even on the darkest nights, the sun shines. The sun doesn't go away. It's only due to our perspective based upon where we are. Whether we're able to see the light, feel the light, experience the light. But keeping in mind that we have an opportunity to put into practice a new, deeper way. That's what the Science of Mind teaching is all about. The essence of our being is love, is light. The light is always where we are because that is what we are. We may have been deluded in the past into accepting a story of our past, but right now, you have the chance to choose a new day. What will you choose? We have a very practical, usable philosophy, a teaching, that we can change our lives by awakening to the truth of our being. As we engage ourselves in this practice, we can reap infinite results. We can move mountains, feed the multitudes from loaves and fishes. We can bring about a global transformation that ushers in a complete new dimension of peace, love, unity, and oneness. And I'm firmly in the camp that believes that's all on the way right now. We are doing it. It's not about being the best. It's about being better than you were the day before. Now I'm going to quote the great philosopher, Whoopi Goldberg. In Sister Act 2, she sings a song. If you want to be somebody, if you want to go somewhere, you better wake up and pay attention. Go, Whoopi. That's one of the songs. And it's a metaphysical lesson for all of us that we are accountable for our own awakening. If we want to express what we already are, just allow the I am to manifest, to move us, to individualize us, to express who and what we are. We have to wake up and pay attention. In The Healing Anatomy of Prayer, Dr. Holmes says, and this is really familiar, God in you, as you, is you. And what better place to begin a new story? Here's a local icon, Mark Twain. Okay, Virginia City, that's local. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. What a wise man Samuel Clemens was. Here's a quote from Linda Poindexter. That's an unfortunate name for a child. Poindexter. Anyway. One small crack does not mean that you were broken. It means you were put to the test and didn't fall apart. Humpty couldn't claim that. So final affirmation. I create the story of my life with every thought I think, every word I speak. Today, I choose to be more mindful, vigilant, and purposeful of the power that I have access to. I understand there's a power for good in the universe, and I am